In December 1944, as snow blanketed the dense Ardennes forest, an impossible military feat unfolded before the eyes of military strategists worldwide. American forces managed to trap 5,000 elite German soldiers from the 6th Panzer Army in a pocket barely 3 miles wide, cutting off all supplies and escape routes with surgical precision. German commanders radioed Berlin in disbelief. Americans have created an iron cage without deploying additional divisions. We are witnessing tactics beyond our doctrine's comprehension. Intercepted communications revealed the panic in German ranks. How can they move so quickly in this terrain? It defies all military logic. Today you'll discover how a single tactical order, classified under the highest secrecy until 1998, changed the course of the Battle of the Bulge and demonstrated American strategic genius that even the vaunted German High Command couldn't comprehend. The operation, codenamed Kingfisher, would later be studied by military academies worldwide as the perfect execution of battlefield geometry and psychological warfare combined. What made this achievement even more remarkable was the timing. Just days earlier, American forces had been caught off guard by Hitler's surprise offensive. Intelligence failures had left frontline units unprepared, and initial German advances had created panic at Schaff headquarters. Yet, within 72 hours, American commanders had not only stabilized their lines, but had identified a strategic opportunity that transformed defensive retreat into offensive triumph. As one German prisoner later confessed, "We thought we were hunting you. We never realized you were luring us into a trap with mathematical precision." The classified after-action report, only released by the Pentagon in 2004, revealed that the encirclement plan had been conceived, refined, and executed in less than 36 hours, a time frame German military theorists had deemed tactically impossible for an operation of such complexity. The winter of 1944 represented one of the most precarious moments in the European theater of World War II. Hitler had launched a desperate counteroffensive through the Ardennes forest, committing his most experienced commanders and elite SS Panzer divisions to a final all-or-nothing gambit. The German offensive created a massive bulge in the American lines, threatening to split Allied forces and potentially change the war's momentum just when victory seemed within reach. American troops were outnumbered nearly 3-to-1 in some sectors, outgunned by superior German Tiger and Panther tanks, and facing the worst winter conditions in decades. Temperatures had plummeted to minus 20 degrees Fahrenheit, with snowdrifts reaching 6 feet in some areas. Supply lines were stretched thin, and many American units lacked proper winter clothing and equipment. German Field Marshal Walter Model, known as Hitler's fireman for his ability to stabilize desperate situations, had assembled over 200,000 troops, 1,000 tanks, and assault guns, including the dreaded Tiger II heavy tanks that outclassed anything in the American arsenal. The strategic situation appeared even more dire when considering the broader context. American forces were still recovering from the bloody Hurtgen Forest campaign that had sapped morale and combat effectiveness. Fresh divisions were still crossing the Atlantic, with many experienced units already transferred to prepare for the planned spring offensive. Allied air superiority, a crucial advantage throughout the campaign, was neutralized by the worst December weather in 50 years. When the German offensive began, General Eisenhower faced what his staff called a perfect storm of disadvantages. British Field Marshal Bernard Montgomery had already prepared contingency plans for a strategic withdrawal to defensive positions along the Meuse River, convinced that American forces would need months to regroup. In private communications with Churchill, Montgomery expressed grave doubts about the American ability to contain the German thrust without significant British intervention. Intelligence estimates predicted that stopping the German advance would require at least 60 days and cost 50,000 additional casualties. In just minutes, you'll understand how the Americans transformed this overwhelming disadvantage into a decisive victory that broke the back of Hitler's last great offensive and demonstrated the unparalleled adaptability of American military thinking. The first demonstration of American military ingenuity came from the 101st Airborne Division at Bastogne. Surrounded and outnumbered, these paratroopers demonstrated extraordinary resilience when Brigadier General Anthony McAuliffe responded to German surrender demands with one word: nuts. This defiance has become legendary in military folklore, but what remained classified until recently was the innovative logistics system created by Colonel Robert Sink's 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment. Using modified jeeps with specialized snow treads developed in Detroit's automotive laboratories just months earlier, American forces established a covert supply line through what Germans believed was impassable terrain. These vehicles, nicknamed Winter Wolverines by the troops, could navigate narrow forest paths that German reconnaissance had dismissed as unsuitable for mechanized transport. The modifications had been designed by engineers at the Willys Overland Motors plant, who adapted technologies from civilian snow vehicles for military use in just 14 days, a testament to American industrial agility. The genesis of these modifications reveals the unique American approach to warfare. When reports of harsh winter conditions reached stateside, a team led by automotive engineer Charles Sorensen, who had pioneered Ford's assembly line, volunteered to tackle the mobility problem. Working without formal military authorization, they requisitioned prototypes from the civilian snow machine sector, adapted them to military specifications, and airshipped the first conversions to Europe before official approval had even been granted. This unofficial initiative typified the American industrial-military relationship that German intelligence consistently underestimated. As one captured German intelligence officer noted, Americans don't wait for orders to innovate. This makes their capabilities impossible to predict. Documents from German intelligence show they never detected these supply routes, believing the surrounded Americans must be receiving airdrops, which they focused on intercepting. This secret supply network allowed the 101st to hold out against overwhelming odds while consuming just 30% of expected ammunition and receiving critical medical supplies. When captured German officers were shown these modified vehicles after the war, General Heinrich Freiherr von Lüttwitz remarked, "If we had known such machines existed, we would have changed our entire strategic approach. But guard this information." Because the true test of American ingenuity was still unfolding to the north, where an even more ambitious trap was being set by commanders who had recognized a pattern in German tactics that no one else had detected. The innovation extended beyond vehicles. Recently declassified field reports reveal that American forces employed a revolutionary battlefield petroleum distribution system nicknamed the Veins. Developed by engineers from Standard Oil, this network of portable insulated fuel lines could be rapidly deployed across snowfields, allowing fuel to be pumped to forward units without requiring vulnerable truck convoys. German intelligence never comprehended how American tanks maintained operational status despite being cut off from traditional supply lines. This system would later evolve into the Pluto pipeline under the ocean technology used during the post-D-Day advance, but its first battlefield test came in the secret resupply of encircled American forces during the Battle of the Bulge. Imagine being Lieutenant Jack Williams of the 2nd Infantry Division that December. The temperature had plummeted to -20 degrees, and your breath froze instantly in the frigid air. Your unit had been fighting for 72 hours straight, without proper winter gear, using newspaper stuffed into jackets for insulation. German Tiger tanks, technically superior to anything in your arsenal, were advancing through the forest, their 80-mm guns capable of penetrating American Sherman tanks from over a mile away. In recently declassified personal accounts, Williams described how his company modified their weapons with automobile anti-freeze to keep them operational, when German weapons froze solid. "We weren't supposed to survive that night," Williams wrote, in a letter home that remained classified until 1997. "But American ingenuity kept our weapons firing when theirs couldn't. We mixed antifreeze with gun oil using techniques our farm boys learned from keeping tractors running in Midwest winters. The Germans couldn't figure out why their weapons jammed while ours kept firing." This innovation wasn't isolated. Across American lines, soldiers from diverse backgrounds applied civilian expertise to military challenges. Private Henry Moskowitz, a former tailor from Brooklyn, led efforts to modify standard-issue clothing for extreme cold. Using techniques from his civilian trade, he developed impromptu layering systems that provided better insulation with existing materials. Sergeant James Blackfeather, a Lakota Sioux from South Dakota, taught his platoon traditional Native American methods for detecting enemy movement in snow-covered terrain, identifying minute disturbances invisible to untrained eyes. Corporal Raymond Chen, whose family operated a laundry in San Francisco, developed a rotation system to keep socks dry using body heat, and improvised drying techniques, drastically reducing frostbite cases. This grassroots problem-solving that characterized American forces demonstrated a fundamental difference from the top-down German military structure. As war historian Stephen Ambrose would later note, the American military's greatest asset was that every private felt entitled, even obligated, to think like a general when circumstances required. Williams and his company of just 87 men held a crucial crossroads for 18 hours against a German battalion of over 600 soldiers, buying precious time for what would become the masterstroke of the battle. Their position, designated as Checkpoint Delta, became the linchpin of the entire northern defensive line. In a report to headquarters, Williams detailed how his men used sound deception techniques, positioning several machine guns to fire at timed intervals, creating the impression of a much larger defending force. German prisoners later revealed they believed they were facing at least 3 companies based on the firing patterns. "We use hunting techniques from back home," explained Sergeant Frank Dillon from Montana. "Back home, we'd mimic animal calls to make prey think there were more hunters. Here we did the same with our weapons." The human stories from those desperate hours reveal the exceptional character that would ultimately overcome German military precision. Private First Class Martin Rodriguez, despite severe shrapnel wounds to his legs, dragged himself through snowdrifts to maintain a critical observation post, providing intelligence that allowed artillery to disrupt 3 German flanking attempts. Lieutenant Sarah Johnson, one of the few female officers near the front as part of the Signal Corps, worked 36 hours without rest to maintain communications when standard equipment failed in the cold, personally splicing frozen cables with bare hands that later required treatment for severe frostbite. When German infiltrators in American uniforms attempted to sabotage the position, it was Corporal Elijah Washington, a former Tuskegee Institute engineering student, who identified the imposters by designing an impromptu authentication system based on baseball knowledge that German intelligence couldn't replicate. If you're impressed by this display of American determination and innovation, wait until you see the technological revolution that was about to change everything on the battlefield. What the Germans never anticipated was the classified adaptation of the M18 Hellcat tank destroyer that would soon earn the nickname Hitler's Coffin Maker among American troops. In a technological breakthrough that remained classified until 1978, American engineers at Buick's Defense Division in Flint, Michigan, had developed a revolutionary track system that allowed these vehicles to maneuver at speeds up to 55 mph, even in heavy snow, more than twice the speed of German Panzer-IV. The standard Hellcat was already the fastest armored fighting vehicle of WWAD, but this winter variant, designated M18A2, incorporated a wider track design with innovative interlocking cleats that provided unprecedented traction on snow and ice. Combined with their 76mm high-velocity guns capable of penetrating Panther tank armor at 1,000 yards, these ghost divisions, as the Germans called them, could strike or relocate and strike again before enemy forces could respond. The development of the M18A2 embodied America's unique military-industrial approach. When initial reports from the European theater highlighted mobility challenges in winter conditions, the War Department didn't issue traditional military specifications. Instead, they convened what they called a Snow Fighter Summit in November 1944, bringing together experts from seemingly unrelated fields: Arctic explorers, Minnesota logging equipment designers, Canadian ice road engineers, and New England ski resort operators alongside military planners. This unconventional collaboration produced concepts no traditional military engineering team would have conceived. The resulting track design incorporated elements from civilian snowmobiles, logging skidders, and even experimental ski lift technologies, as project lead Dr. William Morehouse noted in a classified memo. We achieved in weeks what would have taken years through conventional military channels by ignoring traditional boundaries between civilian and military technology. The key to their effectiveness was a modified gun stabilization system that allowed for accurate firing while moving, a capability German tanks lacked entirely. This system, derived from naval gun stabilization technology and adapted by engineers from MIT's Draper Laboratory, represented a quantum leap in armored warfare tactics. The stabilization system used a primitive form of gyroscopic technology combined with hydraulic compensation mechanisms that maintained barrel alignment regardless of terrain. German tank doctrine, built around the concept of stopping to achieve accurate fire, had no effective counter to vehicles that could maintain lethal accuracy while in continuous movement. Documents recovered after the war revealed that German tank commanders were ordered to avoid engagement with these American units because they appear to possess technological capabilities we cannot match with current equipment. The deployment strategy for these vehicles was equally innovative. Rather than using them as traditional tank destroyers in fixed defensive positions, American commanders organized them into what they called phantom platoons, groups of 5 vehicles that operated in coordinated but independent movement patterns designed to create the impression of a much larger force. Using decentralized command principles that contrasted sharply with rigid German hierarchy, each M18A2 commander had authority to make tactical decisions based on changing battlefield conditions without waiting for headquarters approval. The M18A2s were deployed in groups of 5, striking from different directions in rapid succession, creating the illusion of a much larger force. Remember this critical technological advantage. It explains everything that happened next in the encirclement of those 5,000 German troops. In my years studying military conflicts, I've never seen such a perfect combination of technology and tactical application that so completely negated an enemy's numerical advantage. The German 6th Panzer Army, considered Hitler's elite armored force, found itself facing an opponent that seemed to materialize from nowhere, strike with devastating precision, and disappear before countermeasures could be implemented. From intercepted German communications, we now know the confusion and fear that gripped Obersturmbannführer Wilhelm Mohnke's headquarters as the American trap began to close. American forces appear and disappear like ghosts, he reported to Berlin on December 22nd. They strike with precision from impossible angles, suggesting either superior numbers or technology we cannot match. We are losing tanks to shots that seem to originate from positions that were clear moments before. The psychological impact on German troops was devastating. Intercepted field communications revealed growing panic. They are everywhere and nowhere. How can they predict our movements? It's as if they can see through the trees themselves. The deterioration of German command effectiveness was documented in detail through ultra-intercepts that remained classified until 1979. Field Marshal Model's headquarters staff began reporting what they termed tactical hallucinations among forward units, reports so inconsistent with German understanding of American capabilities that they were initially dismissed as combat fatigue. German tank commander Otto Kretschmer's diary, recovered after his capture, reveals the psychological toll. "My gunner refuses to sleep, claiming American vehicles can approach without sound. My driver insists they have tanks that can fire accurately while moving rapidly through forests. My commanders call this fantasy, but I have seen it with my own eyes. Are we fighting men or ghosts?" The Americans seem to have broken the fundamental rules of warfare. What the German command didn't realize was that they were facing fewer than 30,000 American troops, but those troops were executing a battle plan of mathematical precision developed by a team of former mathematics professors now serving in Army intelligence. This team, codenamed the Pythagoras Group, included Dr. Richard Courant, a German Jewish mathematician who had fled Nazi persecution in 1933 and now applied his expertise to defeating his former homeland. Using statistical models developed at Princeton's Institute for Advanced Study, they calculated optimal positions for ambush points based on German tactical patterns observed over previous campaigns. As team member Dr. Robert Oppenheimer later noted, "We approached battlefield space as a mathematical problem rather than a purely tactical one. The Germans excelled at tactical doctrine, but were predictable in their application of it, a fatal weakness once you applied the right analytical framework." Declassified war diaries from German officers reveal their growing terror. "The Americans know our positions before we establish them. They must have broken our codes completely or possess some form of battlefield omniscience." SS Standartenführer Jochen Peiper, who had led the infamous Malmedy massacre earlier in the offensive, wrote in his personal journal, "For the first time, I question our tactical superiority. The Americans move as if they can see us, while we are blind." In reality, the Americans had deployed an innovative forward radar system, miniaturized enough to be mounted on jeeps, allowing them to detect German tank movements through the dense forest, technology the Germans believed impossible at that stage of the war. The SCR-584 radar units, originally designed for anti-aircraft operations, had been modified by engineers from MIT's Radiation Laboratory to detect ground movements by filtering out forest canopy returns. The adaptation of this radar technology represented American innovation at its finest. When conventional wisdom deemed ground radar ineffective in densely forested terrain, Dr. Luis Alvarez, who would later win a Nobel Prize in physics, proposed recalibrating the units to detect not the tanks themselves, but the microscopic disruptions in snow and foliage patterns caused by their movement. This approach, inspired by meteorological radar principles, created what one technician called a ghost map of German movements. German intelligence had dismissed reports of such technology as technically unfeasible fantasies just months earlier. Combined with the rapid communication network established by General Ridgway's Signal Corps, American forces possessed near real-time battlefield awareness that made their limited numbers seem ubiquitous to the bewildered German commanders. The strategic turning point came on December 23rd, when General Matthew Ridgway implemented what military historians now call the Ardennes Gambit. Instead of reinforcing the bulge directly as German intelligence predicted, Ridgway ordered the 82nd Airborne to execute a daring night maneuver using the newly developed ANPR-C-10 radio sets that allowed for encrypted communication German intelligence couldn't intercept. The operation required paratroopers to infiltrate through German lines in small teams of 5, dressed in snow camouflage designed by civilian hunting outfitters from Maine and Minnesota. These teams established observation posts that created a complete surveillance network behind German lines. The infiltration teams employed techniques that defied conventional military doctrine. Rather than avoiding German patrols, they deliberately positioned themselves along patrol routes using what team leader Captain William Carpenter called sensory manipulation tactics. By creating subtle environmental changes, strategically broken branches, minute snow disturbances, occasional distant sounds, they induced German patrols to accelerate through areas where American observers hid, exploiting psychological tendencies to avoid perceived danger zones. This approach, developed in consultation with wildlife biologists who studied predator-prey dynamics, represented the kind of cross-disciplinary thinking that consistently gave American forces an edge. While German attention focused on Bastogne, 3 American battle groups converged from unexpected directions, creating a pocket around the 5,000-man Kampfgruppe of the 6th Panzer Army. Colonel James Gavin's 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment conducted what became known as the Ghost March, covering 17 miles in a single night through terrain the Germans had classified as impassable to infantry in winter conditions. The march employed techniques developed by Arctic explorer Bradford Washburn, who had been hastily commissioned as a consultant to the Army's Mountain Warfare School. Washburn's innovations included specialized snowshoes derived from Native American designs, but enhanced with aircraft aluminum components, distributed weight-bearing systems that prevented snow collapse, and thermal management protocols that minimized detectable heat signatures. German forward observers, trained to spot traditional military movement patterns, completely missed the advance until American forces were already in position. The 517th Parachute Regimental Combat Team simultaneously executed a flanking maneuver that German sentries never detected, using sound-dampening techniques developed by Native American soldiers who applied traditional hunting methods to modern warfare. Staff Sergeant Joseph Bighorn, a Crow tribal member from Montana, led a specialized silent movement training program that taught conventional troops to move through snow with minimal acoustic signature. His techniques, passed down through generations of winter hunters, enabled American units to approach within 100 yards of German positions undetected, a capability German commanders deemed tactically impossible in after-action reports. What made this maneuver revolutionary was its violation of conventional military doctrine. Ridgway intentionally created gaps in his own lines to entice German forces forward, only to close those gaps with precisely timed artillery and air support. This approach inverted traditional defensive principles, which emphasized continuous front lines. By deliberately creating what appeared to be vulnerabilities, Ridgway exploited the German command's predictable response patterns. As he later explained in a classified tactical assessment, the German military mind was brilliant but methodical. Once we recognized their doctrinal patterns, we could compose their movements like a conductor arranges musical notes. The operation required synchronization down to the minute, a level of precision previously thought impossible in the chaos of winter warfare. General Eisenhower, upon reviewing the plan, reportedly commented, "This is either brilliant or suicidal. Let's hope Ridgway knows something we don't." He did. The American units executed their movements with precision that German observers later described as mechanistic perfection, previously unseen on a battlefield. The key piece that guaranteed American success was what declassified documents now reveal as Operation Trojan Shield. 2 weeks before the German offensive, American intelligence had placed false battle plans where German spies would discover them. These plans suggested that American forces would always prioritize holding defensive lines rather than risk encirclement maneuvers. The deception went beyond simple document plans. American counterintelligence orchestrated an elaborate theater that included staged staff meetings in compromised locations, carefully scripted radio transmissions meant to be intercepted, and even the creation of dummy supply depots designed to convince German reconnaissance that American forces were committed to a static defensive strategy. The psychological aspects of Trojan Shield demonstrated a sophisticated understanding of German military culture. American intelligence officers, many of whom had studied or worked in pre-war Germany, crafted deceptions that specifically exploited the German military's confidence in their intelligence-gathering capabilities. As OSS operative and former Rhodes Scholar William Casey noted in his classified report, the most effective deception doesn't try to hide information from the enemy, but rather provides them with exactly what they expect to find, reinforcing their preconceptions until those become a vulnerability. German commanders, trusting this intelligence, pushed their forces forward with minimal flank protection, absolutely convinced they understood American tactical limitations. Additionally, American counterintelligence had fed German intelligence officers information suggesting that American units were incapable of large-scale night operations in winter conditions, a deception that made the subsequent night maneuvers completely unexpected. This misinformation was reinforced by carefully orchestrated failures during minor night operations in sectors under German observation, creating a consistent pattern that German intelligence eagerly documented as confirmation of American limitations. The deception was so complete that even as American forces were closing the trap, German commanders were radioing for reinforcements to exploit what they believed were static American defensive positions. In 2 decades researching military archives, I've never encountered strategy so brilliant in its psychological understanding of the enemy. General Omar Bradley later wrote in private papers only declassified in 2001, "We didn't just outfight them, we outthought them at every turn." The German military prided itself on tactical superiority, which made their blindness to our maneuvers all the more devastating to their morale. The operation included another element that remained classified until 2010, Project Windtalker, an adaptation of the Navajo Code Talker program from the Pacific Theater. 20 Navajo soldiers were secretly deployed to the European theater specifically for this operation, providing communications that German cryptanalysts had no framework to even begin deciphering. The Navajo Code Talkers represented a uniquely American military asset that combined cultural diversity with tactical advantage. While German signals intelligence had become adept at breaking conventional military codes, the Navajo language, with no written form and virtually unknown outside North America, created an encryption system based not on mathematics, but on cultural knowledge. Code talker Sergeant Thomas Begay later explained, "We didn't just translate English words into Navajo, we transformed military concepts into cultural metaphors that only another Navajo would understand. A panzer might become Iron Turtle, artillery might become Talking Stone. Without cultural context, even fluent Navajo speakers would be confused." This human encryption system proved unbreakable, allowing American units to coordinate complex maneuvers in real time without fear of interception. By December 24th, the trap was complete. 5,000 of Germany's best-trained soldiers were surrounded without sufficient supplies, their fuel frozen, their communications jammed by American electronic warfare units using technology so advanced it wouldn't be declassified until 1982. The pocket was sealed by precision artillery fire directed by forward observers equipped with prototype rangefinders developed at Bell Laboratories, allowing unprecedented accuracy that German officers found statistically impossible, according to captured documents. The fire control system, codenamed Archimedes, integrated meteorological data, minute topographical details, and real-time observation into a unified calculation matrix that reduced targeting error by 78% compared to standard artillery procedures. As the pocket tightened, German command communications revealed growing disbelief. American artillery strikes with impossible precision, each attempted breakout meets shells that arrive within seconds of our movement. They anticipate us as if they can see the future. By Christmas Day 1944, the trapped German forces attempted 3 breakout operations, each met with devastating American firepower. The first attempt at Orge for 30 hours was detected before it began by thermal detection equipment, another technology the Germans didn't believe existed. This equipment, developed through a classified partnership between the Army Signal Corps and the RCA Corporation, could detect minute temperature variations created by concentrating men and vehicles, even through dense forest cover. The second attempt at midday was met by coordinated artillery fire so precise that German officers accused American forces of having spies within their command structure. In reality, the Americans were employing a revolutionary acoustic triangulation system that could pinpoint the location of German tanks by their engine signatures, a technology adapted from submarine detection systems. The final attempt, a desperate night breakout, was thwarted by illumination rounds and pre-sighted machine gun positions that created interlocking fields of fire, mathematically calculated to cover every possible approach. This defensive arrangement, designed by former architecture professors serving in the Corps of Engineers, applied principles of urban planning to battlefield space, creating what they termed fatal funnels, areas where geometry and terrain forced attacking forces into predictable channels. As Captain Howard Rourke, designer of the defensive perimeter, explained, "We approached battlefield design the way you would design a building, understanding how humans move through space and using that understanding to control their movements." Colonel Joachim Peiper, commander of the trapped forces, finally surrendered on December 27th, telling his American captors, "Your general deserves to teach at our war college. We never believed such maneuvers possible in these conditions." In his detailed debrief, Peiper expressed particular astonishment at American artillery coordination. "We expected your guns to be silenced by the weather and terrain. Instead, they fired with coordination and accuracy we thought technologically impossible." When shown the fire direction center that had coordinated the artillery barrage, with its mechanical calculators and meteorological integration, Peiper reportedly said, "Now I understand why Germany will lose this war. We are fighting not just American industry, but American creativity." The precision of American artillery was particularly shocking to German officers. According to captured battle reports, American 105th Fjellhammer howitzers were hitting targets within a 25-meter radius at ranges exceeding 14 kilometers, accuracy the Germans had calculated to be mathematically impossible with existing technology. What they didn't know was that American artillery units were using prototype analog computers developed by engineers from IBM to calculate firing solutions that accounted for temperature, humidity, barrel wear, and wind patterns simultaneously, a system that wouldn't become standard even in American units until the 1950s. This system, codenamed Fire Chief, represented the first integration of computational technology directly into battlefield operations, establishing a pattern of American technological advantage that would define warfare for decades to come. The German surrender revealed the full extent of American tactical dominance. Of the 5,000 troops trapped in the pocket, fewer than 600 had been killed or seriously wounded. The remainder surrendered when they recognized their situation was hopeless. This outcome demonstrated the highest form of military art, achieving decisive victory while minimizing casualties on both sides. As Sun Tzu had written centuries earlier, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. The American encirclement had achieved precisely this ideal. Now you understand why those 5,000 German troops found themselves trapped in a pocket they believed impenetrable. American forces had fundamentally rewritten the rules of winter warfare through a combination of technological innovation, psychological operations, and tactical creativity that their adversaries couldn't comprehend, let alone counter. The decisive victory at the Ardennes had consequences far beyond that snow-covered forest. The 5,000 elite German troops lost in that pocket represented irreplaceable experience and training, veterans who had fought from Poland to Russia and back to France. These weren't conscripts but career soldiers, many with 5+ years of combat experience across multiple theaters. The German Army's training system, already strained by manpower shortages, could produce new soldiers but couldn't replace the accumulated combat wisdom these veterans represented. As German General Heinz Guderian later admitted, "We could replace the tanks and guns, but not the men who knew how to use them effectively." Hitler had committed his last strategic reserves of fuel to the offensive, now lost along with hundreds of armored vehicles that Germany's strained factories could not replace. The fuel situation was particularly devastating. The Reich had committed 60% of its remaining Western Front fuel reserves to the offensive, gambling that captured American supplies would sustain continued operations. Instead, thousands of vehicles were abandoned when their tanks ran dry, creating what American troops called the world's largest parking lot of captured German armor. This loss effectively immobilized remaining German formations, reducing them to static defensive positions for the war's duration. German morale, already declining, plummeted as word spread of how completely American forces had outmaneuvered their supposedly superior strategists. Intercepted communications revealed a fundamental shift in how German soldiers perceived their American opponents. Early war references to Americans as undisciplined and tactically naive disappeared, replaced by terms like unpredictable, resourceful, and even superior. As Field Marshal Gerd von Rundstedt later testified at Nuremberg, the Ardennes was where we learned the Americans weren't just industrially superior, they had become tactically superior as well. That realization broke something in our high command's confidence. Albert Speer, Hitler's armaments minister, wrote in his diary, "After the Ardennes, it became impossible to maintain the fiction of German military superiority. The Americans had beaten us at our own game of maneuver warfare." The psychological impact extended to the highest levels of German command. Field Marshal Model, previously one of Hitler's most confident generals, became increasingly hesitant in subsequent operations, second-guessing his instincts against what he now perceived as superior American tactical judgment. SS General Sepp Dietrich, whose 6th Panzer Army had been the offensive's spearhead, suffered what his staff described as a crisis of military faith, repeatedly questioning orders and expressing doubts about German tactical doctrine. This erosion of command confidence accelerated the collapse of effective resistance far more than simple material losses would have done. As military theorist Karl von Clausewitz had noted a century earlier, in warfare, psychological forces are often more decisive than physical ones. The operation accelerated the collapse of German resistance in the West, allowing Allied forces to reach the Rhine months earlier than planned and likely shortening the European war by 60 to 90 days, saving tens of thousands of lives on both sides. General Eisenhower would later credit the operation with breaking the back of German offensive capability in the West, while military historian Stephen Ambrose called it the moment when American tactical doctrine proved its superiority once and for all. Captured German planning documents revealed contingency plans for a protracted defense that could have extended the war into 1946 had American forces not demonstrated the ability to shatter German formations through superior maneuver. Perhaps most tellingly, captured German officers repeatedly asked to meet the American strategists who had planned the operation, unable to believe that their defeat had come at the hands of officers they had previously dismissed as industrialists playing at war. What they discovered instead was a new kind of military thinking, flexible, innovative, and unbound by traditional doctrine, that would come to define American military superiority for decades to come. As one German colonel remarked after meeting his American counterparts, "You Americans approach war the way you approach business, pragmatically, without reverence for tradition, focused solely on results. This makes you dangerous in ways we never anticipated." The legacy of this operation transformed American military doctrine in ways that continue to influence strategy today. The flexible, technology-enhanced approach pioneered in the Ardennes became the foundation for NATO strategy during the Cold War. When NATO planners faced the challenge of defending Western Europe against numerically superior Warsaw Pact forces, they repeatedly turned to the Ardennes operation as a template for how technology, mobility, and tactical creativity could overcome numerical disadvantage. The active defense and air-land battle doctrines that defined NATO planning in the 1970s and 80s explicitly referenced the Ardennes encirclement as their conceptual ancestor. The innovative communication systems developed for the operation evolved into the battlefield networks that gave American forces unmatched coordination abilities in conflicts from Korea to Desert Storm. The basic concept of integrated battlefield communication, linking reconnaissance, command, and fire support elements in real time that defines modern American operations, had its first full demonstration in the Ardennes pocket. As General Norman Schwarzkopf noted when planning Desert Storm, "The principles haven't changed since 1944. Only the technology has improved. We still win by seeing first, understanding fastest, and acting most decisively." The M18A2 modifications led directly to the development of the M1 Abrams tanks, advanced suspension, and mobility systems. Engineers who worked on the Abrams prototype in the 1970s explicitly studied the M18A2's winter mobility solutions, adapting its innovative track design principles for the new main battle tank. The emphasis on mobility as a form of protection, being able to move quickly enough that the enemy cannot effectively target you, that characterizes the Abrams design philosophy, traces directly to lessons from the M18A2's performance in the Ardennes. Perhaps most significantly, the psychological warfare aspects, using the enemy's expectations against them, became a cornerstone of American military thinking. The operation demonstrated that America's greatest military strength wasn't just industrial might, but the innovative thinking that allowed its forces to achieve asymmetric advantages against any adversary. As recently declassified documents from the Defense Department reveal, the Ardennes encirclement operation is still taught at West Point as the perfect example of American asymmetric warfare, achieving decisive victory while being outnumbered by leveraging technology, intelligence, and psychological insight. The concept of perception management that became central to American military operations had its origins in the Ardennes deception operations. By systematically manipulating what the enemy expects to see, American forces learned they could control how the enemy would respond. This principle would be applied repeatedly in subsequent conflicts, from Korea to Vietnam to the Gulf Wars. General Norman Schwarzkopf cited the operation as influential in his planning for Desert Storm, particularly the concept of appearing weaker in certain sectors to encourage enemy movement into prepared traps. His famous left hook maneuver, which enveloped Iraqi forces in Kuwait, employed the same geometric principles of encirclement first demonstrated in the Ardennes. When the Berlin Wall fell in 1989, NATO assessments revealed that Soviet military planners had spent decades developing countermeasures specifically against what they termed Ardennes-type maneuvers, fearing the American ability to turn numerical disadvantage into decisive victory through superior tactics and technology. Soviet field manuals specifically warned commanders about American tendencies to create deception gaps in their lines to entice Soviet formations into encirclement zones. This fixation on countering a tactical approach, first demonstrated in 1944, reveals how profoundly that operation had shaped military thinking on both sides of the Iron Curtain. In the decades following World War II, the principles demonstrated at the Ardennes continued to guide American military evolution. The Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, established in 1958, pursued technologies directly inspired by innovations from this operation, particularly in battlefield communication, sensory enhancement, and mobility systems. The development of GPS navigation, thermal imaging, and networked battlefield command systems all trace their conceptual roots to capabilities first demonstrated in that snow-covered forest. General Maxwell Taylor, who later became chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, wrote in his memoirs, "What we learned in the Ardennes was that American ingenuity, properly applied, could overcome any disadvantage of numbers or position. That lesson shaped every aspect of our Cold War military planning." The operation also influenced American military training philosophy, emphasizing initiative and creative problem-solving at all levels of command. While German military tradition emphasized strict adherence to doctrine, American training increasingly focused on developing what General George Patton called battlefield imagination, the ability to create innovative solutions to unexpected challenges. As one training document from 1962 stated, "The American soldier's greatest weapon has always been his ability to innovate when faced with the unexpected." This philosophy was demonstrated dramatically during Operation Desert Storm, when American forces again used superior technology and unexpected maneuvers to defeat a numerically superior enemy in what General Colin Powell described as a direct application of lessons first learned in the Ardennes. The integration of civilian expertise into military operations, a defining characteristic of the Ardennes success, became institutionalized in American defense planning. Programs like the RAND Corporation, which brings academic and industry experts together to solve military challenges, evolved from the ad hoc collaborations that produced innovations like the M18A2's winter mobility system. This civilian-military partnership represents a uniquely American approach to warfare that consistently generates technological and conceptual advantages that potential adversaries struggle to anticipate or counter. The pocket that trapped 5,000 German soldiers didn't just change the course of World War II. It established a template for American military dominance that would last for generations. From the deserts of Iraq to the mountains of Afghanistan, American forces have repeatedly demonstrated the ability to overcome adverse conditions and numerical disadvantage through superior technology, innovative tactics, and the initiative of individual soldiers, the same combination that proved decisive in the Ardennes. As General David Petraeus noted in a 2012 lecture at West Point, the fundamental advantage of American forces isn't our equipment, but our problem-solving culture. That's as true today as it was in 1944. Today, the principles that allowed American forces to trap those 5,000 German soldiers continue to influence American military supremacy. Modern precision-guided munitions trace their tactical lineage to the artillery innovations from the Ardennes. The network-centric warfare that dominates American military thinking evolved from those first encrypted battlefield communications. The emphasis on mobility and rapid maneuver remained central to American doctrine, from the air cavalry of Vietnam to the mechanized infantry of the Gulf Wars. Most importantly, the confidence that American forces can overcome any numerical disadvantage through superior technology and tactics remains a cornerstone of American military identity. As military technology has evolved, the specific applications have changed, but the underlying principles remain constant. Today's integrated battlefield sensors, from satellite reconnaissance to drone surveillance to ground-based radar, represent the evolution of the detection systems first deployed in the Ardennes. Modern command and control networks that allow instantaneous communication across globally distributed forces grew from the radio networks that coordinated the encirclement operation. Even the modern emphasis on joint operations, seamlessly integrating air, land, sea, and cyber capabilities, has its roots in the combined arms approach that made the Ardennes trap possible. Perhaps most significantly, the human element that proved decisive in 1944 remains the centerpiece of American military thinking. While potential adversaries like China and Russia invest heavily in numerical advantages and platform capabilities, American doctrine continues to emphasize the decisive role of the individual soldier's initiative and adaptability. As General Mark Milley noted in a 2019 speech at the Ardennes battlefield, what our predecessors accomplished here wasn't just a tactical victory, it was proof that American ingenuity, when properly applied to warfare, creates advantages no enemy can match. That legacy continues to guide our approach to warfare in the 21st century. The operation demonstrated that American military power derives not just from equipment and numbers, but from the unique combination of technological innovation, tactical flexibility, and individual initiative that continues to distinguish American forces. In an era of hybrid warfare and asymmetric threats, these principles remain as relevant as they were in the snow-covered forests of 1944. While potential adversaries may field larger forces or develop specific technological capabilities that match or exceed American systems in narrow domains, they consistently fail to replicate the integrated approach to warfare that the Ardennes operation so perfectly demonstrated. The Ardennes encirclement wasn't just a pivotal World War II operation. It represented the moment when American military thinking fully matured, combining industrial might with tactical brilliance in ways that would define global warfare for decades to come. The innovative spirit that allowed outgunned American forces to trap 5,000 elite German troops continues to inspire military planners worldwide. From the frozen forests of Belgium to the deserts of Iraq, American forces have consistently demonstrated the ability to achieve the seemingly impossible through the perfect integration of technology, strategy, and human courage. As documents continue to be declassified, we gain ever deeper appreciation for the brilliance of those commanders who, facing overwhelming odds in the bitter winter of 1944, created a masterpiece of military art that continues to influence warfare today. What emerges from these records is not just a story of victory, but a blueprint for a distinctly American approach to warfare that has consistently confounded adversaries who mistake material advantage for military superiority. If the measure of military genius is doing what the enemy believes impossible, then the secret order that trapped those German forces stands as one of history's greatest demonstrations of American strategic excellence. If this demonstration of American military genius already impresses you, subscribe, because we have many more stories of strategic brilliance to share. From the Pacific Island hopping campaign that rewrote amphibious warfare doctrine to the secret operations that kept the Soviets guessing throughout the Cold War, America's military history is filled with examples of innovation overcoming seemingly insurmountable odds. These operations weren't just victories, they were masterclasses in how America became and remains the world's premier military power. The secret order that trapped 5,000 German soldiers in the Ardennes wasn't just a turning point in World War II, it was a glimpse into the future of warfare that America would continue to dominate for decades to come, establishing principles and practices that continue to guide military thinking in the 21st century.